the Dome Town Meeting TV's look into the State House. We're here with some legislators who work in Montpelier regularly on your behalf. You can watch this and Under the Dome programs here, Comcast 1087, Burlington Telecom 217, or on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Town Meeting TV. I'm joined today by Rep. Martin Lalonde, who's chair of the House Judiciary Committee, and Rep. Barbara Rachelson, who also sits on that committee. Welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, I'm going to just do a quick intro. Rep. Lalonde is a University of Michigan Law School graduate. You spent 12 years as a trial attorney at the Department of Justice Environmental and Natural Resources Division before moving to Vermont. And you have represented South Burlington in the House since 2014 and have chaired the Judiciary Committee for the last 4 years. And Rep. Rachelson is a Brandeis University and University of Michigan School of Social Work graduate. You bring 40 years of nonprofit leadership and social work experience, including your work now teaching at the University of Vermont. Rep. Rachelson has been a state rep since 2012 and has sponsored several laws, well, many, many laws, but you have a focus on youth in the criminal justice system. That's dear to your heart. Thank you. So tell us a little bit about, first just give us an overview. What does the House Judiciary Committee do? What does it touch and what does it oversee?
I'll start and then Barbara can certainly add and correct me. So I mean, we actually a very diverse portfolio in jurisdiction of cases. We deal with the courts, we deal with criminal justice, we deal with constitutional issues. We often are looking at other committees' bills just to make sure that they are constitutional, that they aren't going to affect the courts in some negative way. So it's really kind of broad what we look at.
Give me an example of when another committee has brought you a bill to review.
Yeah, so H772 is a landlord-tenant bill, and there's a lot of court process that is included in that bill, and so we actually spent quite a bit of time on that court process to make sure that worked with how our courts work. So that would be one example, and that was a bill that was in House General. And there was another bill that was in Commerce that had to do with coerced debt, and the reason it was in Commerce is it has a lot to do with banks, but again, there was court process there that we needed to look at and weigh in on.
And so you bring a social work background, you bring a legal background. What's sort of the makeup of the folks who are on House Judiciary, and how do you bring that legal mind to the table?
It's interesting. We have two attorneys on the committee. The most that we've had on the committee since I've been there has been three, where we've had 3 attorneys. So we have a diverse background of individuals, and I think that's important because we are passing laws that non-attorneys need to understand, and so having non-attorneys is very helpful. Besides, we have 3 excellent legislative counsel who serve the committee, so we have really top-notch legal support and input on all the bills that we work on. So it's not necessary to be an attorney on the committee by any stretch.
Yeah. Have you learned a lot being in this role about what Vermonters care about and the impact of this kind of legislation on Vermonters? Want to talk about that a little bit?
For sure, and sometimes it overlaps with what constituents care about. Burlington has cared a great deal about crime, so that has been, right in line. Burlington has cared a lot about sensible gun legislation, which frequently comes to our committee. But Vermont is, there's more to Vermont than Chittenden County, which we're reminded of daily by our colleagues. And there are so many issues and so many bills that we won't get to because we don't have time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's one thing that I'm always amazed at in the legislature is how many bills you see tacked up on the wall, literally outside the committee. And we've gone through crossover. So talk a little bit about what has, first maybe explain to folks what crossover is, and then what's made it through your committee that you're continuing to track into the Senate.
Yeah, so crossover is when all of one body's bills, in this case our House bills, have to be passed out of our committees of jurisdiction. And they go over to the Senate after they pass out of the House chamber. And the same is with the Senate bills come over to us. Although bills may come over before crossover, we really don't start looking at Senate bills until after we've gotten our House bills out the door. So it's just to keep the process moving as far as the bills, having both bodies take a look at them.
So what's crossed over that you're invested in seeing through to the House, to the whole floor for voting?
Yeah, just really quickly, I think we've passed out something like 12 or 13 bills out of probably the 80 to 100 bills that we have. This year we passed them out, but I'll turn it over to you first.
Sure. So one bill that is near and dear to me, and very near and dear to Representative Emily Krasnow of South Burlington, hopefully she's or her constituents are watching, is an animal cruelty bill. And this is something that we've had introduced a few times already. This year's bill was a little bit more comprehensive, and I was thrilled. I was a co-sponsor, and the chair assigned me to report it on the House floor. What's exciting about it is it builds on legislation that we passed in a recent biennium, which enabled the state to hire our first ever director of animal welfare. And we have an amazing director of animal welfare who's an attorney who was teaching at a law school in Georgia. And Vermont, unfortunately, is not sort of up to sort of best practices when it comes to animal welfare and animal cruelty. We have no municipal or state kennels or places to store animals. It's not always small animals, it's horses a lot too, farm animals. And one of the big problems has been, until this bill passed the House, and we're hoping it will make it all the way, is somebody could be convicted of abusing an animal, and sometimes it's sexual abuse. Like there's some horrible abuses that are happening, and there's nothing that could prohibit them from owning animals. And so we have kept hearing about somebody who was doing something in one town, they move to another town, they get animals again. And the other problem is the process has taken a really long time. And so we worked on both expediting the process, on finding ways to support the amazing nonprofit humane societies and shelters that have taken on the state's work and are putting in a fortune of their own money because the state doesn't fund that, and also having more meaningful options for the judge, in addition to fines and jail, of having somebody not own an animal, having somebody have to get counseling, because often it's related to bigger underlying issues. And so that's really exciting to me, that this bill has a really good chance of moving forward. I know the Senate Judiciary is likely to vote it out this week.
Yeah, and it sounds like it does have a money piece attached to it, because there's an appropriations piece. Is that?
It actually
I don't think
didn't. I think we did everything we could without money.
Yeah.
Which is amazing. So basically, the people who are abusing, if their animals are, or being accused of abusing, if their animals are seized, they would need to pay for the feeding and care of the animals while they're in the state custody, which makes sense, because if the animals were home, they would be
still continuing that
right.
payment.
And if they can't, there's a provision for them to get a waiver or a reduction from the court. But it also was looking at, do you have what it takes to be able to take care of your animals moving forward?
Are there other bills that you're working? Thank you for sharing that.
Before you, just on
Yeah.
that particular bill, it seems like frequently or often our bills are making incremental changes, but this is pretty significant. I'd say of the bills we passed this year, this is going to be pretty significant improvement of what the current law is. So I'm pretty excited about this bill as well.
It's great. Did you hear a lot of testimony? Did you have any
We spent a
pushback?
lot of time on this bill.
Yeah.
We spent a lot of time
Yeah,
on this
well,
bill.
it's been multiple sessions and over multiple biennium.
Well, we did something, I'm trying to think. We did something years ago that was related to animal forfeiture if there was dog
Yeah, dog fights.
fighting and seizing the equipment. So it's not really gotten a lot of action in the past bienniums. So we heard from so many people, many humane societies that talked about the sheer number of animals, how long it takes. The longer an animal is, like if it's a dog or a cat, if they're in a kennel for 6 months to a year, it's going to be harder for that animal to be successfully rehomed. They get more anxious. When it's horses, it's incredibly expensive. And oddly enough, like in the top 5 animal abuses, horses are up in that category. And it's not something that I thought about. So we heard a lot too from the director of animal welfare, who not only was able to talk about Vermont. She just got hired in June, and she's been a go-getter. But what other states are doing, and what Vermont could be doing as a next step.
Talk a little bit about, it seems to me, and maybe this is the wrong impression, but judiciary, you're sort of at the end of a long line of, away from the root causes.
Right.
So
right.
how are you, and you spoke to it a little bit, like, are we going to address the underlying causes of what's happening here? How is that, how are you seeing that in Judiciary Committee, and how do you kind of grapple with that fact that
No, that's absolutely right. And so frequently when I talk about what we're doing in criminal justice reform, is I explain that what we most need to do is prevention and put money towards dealing with people who are in crisis and don't have stability in their lives. And because we're at the end of the line. We're at the end of the line where other systems have failed. And but we have to hold people accountable even in that situation as well. So it's often frustrating because we see the results of homelessness, of substance use disorder. We see these things, but we have to work on public safety, and often that means that individuals are going to be held accountable. So, although we look for different ways to do that, such as through really expanding restorative justice opportunities,
Yeah, Raise the Age was a hot topic last year. Tell us where you're at, sort of on that segue of the root causes around youth offender. How is Vermont? What's Vermont doing to approach youth offenders in a compassionate and restorative? And what did you see in the Judiciary Committee this year around that?
So. We didn't do much directly on the juvenile justice. We worked on a related law called youthful offender. And youthful offender allows individuals who are up to 21 years old to have their cases heard in family court. And it is an important path for youth. And so we looked at some of the issues that we felt that were keeping more people from going into youthful offender status. And one of them, particularly if they're closer to 21. So we made some changes where if somebody, when they're about to time out of that, turn 21, if they have a motion that's pending regarding revocation of that status, that the jurisdiction will continue, because that's been one of the issues that
Beyond
we
the age
hear-
of 21?
Beyond
or-
the age of 21 until that underlying motion for revocation is resolved, which means that if they're revoked, they go to the criminal court and continue with their case. But that's been one of the pushbacks that we had heard that are keeping people from, or state's attorneys from really wanting more people in juvenile justice through the youthful offender. The other issue, it will be taken up again next year, which is raise the age, which we delayed until July of 27 to give DCF, the Department of Children and Family, more time to be prepared for that. So far, I've not seen that they are doing what's necessary, but we're going to have a report from them on progress, and I think it's July 1st of this year to kind of see where they are with that. You probably
July
to say
1st,
about
that's
this.
after the session's closed. Is
Next
this-
year, though.
But it's for next year. July of 27
Yeah.
is the date when it will go into place.
Got it.
Unless we do something else.
And we don't have a facility, well, we do have some very small facilities, but when Woodside closed, which I'm glad Woodside closed because it was a problem, DCF has been looking for a new facility. So I have two bills that they're not in-house judiciary. One was, actually I guess one is, but it got taken up in-house human services. One was to eliminate seclusion for youth, because youth were at Woodside put in solitary, which is not appropriate for a youth. It's against the UN Convention on the Child recommendations. Many other states have eliminated it, as well as physical restraints. The physical restraints got some more traction this session. Actually, I can't remember how much of it stayed in. It's like things shuffle around so much. Ann Donahue actually was championing it in human services. But it's like now is the time, and what people were hearing was, but we don't have a facility. Right, but as you're building a facility, build one. Don't build one with cells for solitary confinement, because that's not appropriate. You know, look at other therapeutic type places that one, if somebody needs to be if the doors need to be locked on the inside, then we need to, make sure that they are taking in mind the age of the youth and that we are trying to rehabilitate. Yeah. That kids are very much, their brains developing are more sort of open to rehabilitation and change than, maybe a 30-year-old.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that, maybe you don't hear it as much, but, sometimes is heard is that you all are working in a kind of a bubble and not understanding what life is like. I know the complications around Woodside were argued and debated a lot. How do you grapple with that? I mean, are you actually hearing from enough folks when you are having testimony? And talk to us a little bit about the stories. What does it mean? What are youthful offenders doing? What's the impact on Vermont? And tell us how you're hearing about this.
So we do have the normal cast of characters, I guess. That's maybe not the way to put it, but folks have come in from the state's attorneys, from defenders, ACLU, victims advocates. We do try to reach out, but I've found that it's very difficult to find the lived experience people. We try to bring them in when we can.
We watched court, which was really exciting.
Yes, yeah, we go to.
We got into family court, which is confidential, and that is worth. I mean, it was amazing. I mean, anyone can go in and watch other court proceedings, but not juvenile proceedings. And the court administrator was able to get permission for us from each. They asked the juvenile and their attorney, would it be okay if these legislators sat in? And I think we heard, and like what we heard was we've done it a couple of times, I guess, this biennium.
Burst your bubble.
It totally does. Like I wish we could be in there a day a week, or that we had a way to have more. A lot of states have court watch programs, and again, that's hard with family court. But
yeah, no, that's absolutely true. So the court every year is giving legislators an opportunity in all the courts to spend a day there and to sit in on hearings. And if the parties approve, sitting in on family court as well. Yeah, and I absolutely agree that that's really eye-opening. Actually going to where things are happening that we're impacting is, I think, even better than trying to find, although we do try to find people who have lived experiences, it's still not quite the same unless you're actually sitting there in court and hearing what the individuals are going through.
And what is, we see, sort of headline news on maybe CAX or Digger about big ticket items, but the smaller cases, the smaller offenses that are bringing people into the criminal justice system. I mean, I know Vermont has the requirement that people under 26 have to get a GED if they touch the criminal justice system at some point. We have the, what is this called? The Community High School of Vermont,
Right.
Which has got an astonishingly large population. Right. I've lost the thread of my question here, but just tell me a little bit about what's the impact of Vermont on Vermonters of youthful offenders. Are they messing up our lives? Are they wreaking havoc, or is it really interfamily and?
Well, we sometimes hear about kids who are like drug runners from other states, right? Like those are the ones that make the news a lot, because we've heard, oh, it's so lenient in Vermont that people are recruited to be drug runners. And I'm not saying that's not a problem, but that's a very different solution than the kids who are committing crimes at a young age. There's so much research that shows that most people age out of crime. The more we involve people in the criminal justice system with a permanent record, a felony, that was a big discussion we had Friday, was, are we going to make this a felony for people under 18? Like, that has a lifelong, like you're still paying for it.
Impact.
But I think my sense is, and I know that there's been more data out, that crime is down. And we know that brains don't develop until, mid-20s, and people do things that they're not fully thinking through. And what's the best way to deal with that? That's not to say there aren't people that are doing harmful things that are serious.
So on the more serious side, and if you have more to say about this, we can, but the H409 bail revocation. So talk to us a little bit about this.
Right, sure.
Which is the ability for judges to revoke bail on folks that are habitually offending.
Right. So we did look at that this year and last year, and the thing is that our Constitution doesn't allow courts or prosecutors the prosecutors can request this. People can't be held on bail unless they're a flight risk. And the bail revocation statute also adds that if the...
So can you just pause right there? You can't be held on bail unless you're a flight risk. So your propensity or the potential to commit another crime is not a reason to hold somebody on bail?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. Now, there's an exception for the revocation if the person is out on bail and they intimidate a witness. They undermine the judicial process. They can have the bail revoked for that very limited circumstance. There's been a push to kind of broaden the circumstances, but that runs up against the Constitution. So, and so rather than changing our law related to that, what we did in passing 409, and I'm not sure if it's going to pass out of the Senate or not, is making it clear that if the prosecutor brings a motion for bail revocation and it's denied by the court, there's a path to appeal that. So if they want to try to push the envelope on this issue, they can do that in front of the Vermont Supreme Court. instead of in front of the legislature, because it's ultimately the Vermont Supreme Court that decides on whether something is constitutional or not. So it's pretty narrow what we've ended up doing with that. But I would like to just back up for just one moment, what you talked about youthful offender and just general crime or holding people accountable. What our focus has been the last 4 years, really, it's kind of it's keeping individuals accountable. And what that means is the fact that we're looking at courts that are taking way too long between an offense and the consequences. So we've really put a lot of effort into making sure that we have the right resources for prosecutors, courts, defense counsel, and victim advocates. And we've made progress in that. And we can talk a little bit about the so-called accountability court. I call it the accountability docket, which shows that this can work. But part of that accountability and having rapid accountability is expanding our diversion options. And so last biennium, one of the most important bills that we passed, and we're still getting it implemented now, expanded what's called pre-charge diversion. So before somebody even gets to court, law enforcement can divert an individual to restorative justice, to community justice centers. So, and that really does give, actually, in my view, and many of our views, better accountability and quicker accountability. So that's really been a focus for both youthful offender and any offenders. So.
And are you tracking statistics on those pre-court diversion? Is there sort of demographic tracking to see
It's being set up. It's being set up. We don't really have it. We expect that for this current year to actually have the reporting that we put into the law that we wanted. But it's really just been slowly. Well, I don't know how slow, but it's just been getting implemented.
Rolling out.
Yeah, it's rolling out.
Yeah. What is the accountability docket?
I'll let you.
So basically, back in the fall, the governor and met with the mayor, and they agreed on this plan to do this pilot
Mayor of
court.
Burlington.
Yes,
Yeah,
the mayor
yeah,
of
that's
Burlington.
okay,
So they did a pilot accountability court where they had a dedicated prosecutor brought in, and basically the resources were there for both the Defender General, the state attorney's office, Sarah George's office, as well. And we got to, there was a hearing back in February, I guess, where we were hearing the data. What they did was they took, they were looking at the backlog in Chittenden Court, and they looked at individuals that had 5 or more open charges. So these are people who, many of them were unhoused, who, again, back to Martin's point, months would go by, and so if they had done like a petty theft, they're like, well, nothing happened. I might as well go back in, because we know swift, predictable punishment is really the best deterrent. And so what was so remarkable, back to your resources, was they also brought a lot of the community providers there. The governor's office had somebody from the Agency of Human Services there, and her job was to break down barriers. And having worked in the field for years, you know, normally it's like, we need to get the person in this program. Oh no, they're not on Medicaid, or they're 16, or they have a kid. There's always some reason why they can't get in there. And so they connected so many people. They had 79 people whose cases were resolved. 21 received prison sentences, 8 got split sentences, which is a combination of prison and probation. 28 people got connected to a variety of community programs. Some people went to treatment court for substance use. Some people went to a residential treatment program. They were able to look holistically at what the needs were and provide services and support, including support while the court case was going on, so that people would show up and people would go get their drug testing or follow through. So it was very exciting to see that.
And is this happening at the Chittenden County Courthouse?
It stopped. Okay. It ended, and now it's the governor has moved a pilot, a little bit of a different a smaller version to Rutland County, but it made a huge difference. We heard that it really, Sarah George felt like the backlog is well chipped away at. And so they are doing it 1 day a week now without these extra resources because they loved sort of what it was able to accomplish.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, it kind of proved up what we've been working on for the past few years, which with a surge of resources, we can get on top of the backlog and really have quicker processing.
And was the backlog left over from sort of the COVID era, or was the backlog left? I mean, that's a long time.
It even
Yeah.
predated.
Okay.
It predated that. I don't think in the 12 years I've been there in the building, I think we've under-resourced the criminal justice system, and
Yeah.
we've been working towards fixing that.
So the backlog is something that's happening incrementally, systemically, not necessarily from a one-time event.
Yeah, well, certainly the COVID did worse. Made it worse. So.
Yeah. Talk a little bit more about, I mean, you alluded to it a little bit around, the other compounding factors that bring people into the criminal justice system, but how do mental health issues come into play
Yeah.
in your committee? Who are you hearing from, and how is that?
We are spending a lot of time on that now because we're looking at people who may not be competent to stand trial, which is a very small
I was gonna say,
number.
how many folks?
We've heard maybe 6. I don't know if that's tied to the 6.
That's tied to
To
the life
Right.
sentence crimes.
Yeah.
So there's more than that.
Yeah, well, I only ever hear about it when it comes to a major crime.
Right.
So
Right.
competency to stand trial is
Which is-
actually something that happens.
Right, which is different than in saying that,
Yeah, yeah.
but they're tied together. But if you look nationally at who is in prison, there's one, it used to be, I have not seen data recently, 75% of the people in prison were abused as kids, which is already creating a need for mental health counseling, etc. And many people have co-occurring disorders in our state, which means that and what I've seen is somebody is extremely depressed or they're very anxious. They can't necessarily get in to see a psychiatrist. There's a lot of stigma and shame, and people sort of, I've had friends who are like, people should just, buck up. It's like, okay, you can't buck up from diabetes any more than you can buck up from depression. And so I have seen too many people, get turned on to drugs as a way of self-medicating, and then are suffering with addiction to an illegal substance, get arrested to support their addiction. And again, if we had, if people felt more comfortable and had access to mental health counseling earlier on, back to prevention, I think we would see fewer people turning to drugs to self-medicate. And so we don't look at institutions, and corrections looks at what is delivered to people in prison. I know compared to when I've been at national juvenile justice or crime conferences, other states provide way more for longer. If you're in for 6 years, like corrections would say, oh, we'll give you services the last 6 months you're in before you go out. And it's like, sitting there for 5.5 years and not getting services is a problem.
So you're looking at ways to integrate services into facilities now? Or?
That is really, Martin reminds me, that's not our committee.
Okay.
But we do talk a lot to the people on
institutions and
corrections.
corrections.
Yes.
Right.
But the forensic facility is in our committee, even though we have other committees are.
Forensic facility.
Which
you
is-
need to explain what that is.
okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so It's where somebody is involved in the criminal justice system and there's a mental health or disability issue, and it's to receive treatment as well as to protect public safety. So the bill that we're considering would look at individuals who have been found incompetent to stand trial or not guilty by reason of insanity, whose underlying offense carries a life sentence. So it would be sexual assault or murder, manslaughter. So it's limited to the really higher risk, potentially, individuals. And the idea is for those who are incompetent to stand trial is to try to bring them to competency. And that's what a forensic facility would try to do, is have a competency restoration program. But beyond that, if somebody's not restorable to competency, they would continue to get treatment. If they are no longer a danger, they could be released to less supervision than a forensic facility would provide. But if they are a danger, they would continue to get treatment to address those risks. So eventually, the idea is that the individual can be released from a locked facility, which is what a forensic facility would be.
And are we currently contracting out for a forensic
We
facility?
don't have one. We're one of the very few states that doesn't have one. We're trying to get it right. Our part of this is the process for making sure that we have due process and equal protection of individuals who might go into a forensic facility. From there, it is other committees that will look at what that forensic facility looks like. Currently, it would be, in the bill, would be Department of Corrections would oversee it and would house it, and we're having a lot of pushback, and we have concerns about that as well, that's looking more carceral than therapeutic.
Yeah.
So that is being dealt with in corrections and institutions, human services, and healthcare. So there's other committees looking at, we're looking at who goes there and where it's going to go and what's the treatments are out of our jurisdiction. So,
well, tell me why should Vermonters care about that when there's 6, 7 people that it affects in theory? And I'm sort of.
Yeah, no, it's a good question.
Why?
We've had good testimony from individuals who have had loved ones who have been murdered, and individuals are released. They're found not guilty by reason of insanity. It's very narrow. It doesn't happen very often in Vermont. But they were trying to figure out where to hold this individual, and this is just a recent case over the past year. So that's a big part of it, is the victims have really been driving this, including a victim, a parent of a daughter who was murdered in Bennington has really been pushing for this for a while. So it's a public safety issue, but it's also an issue for the individual who has committed the crime. And there's issues with respect to making sure they're getting the right therapy as well, as opposed to just being held in an incarcerated situation. So,
and some of the people who are found incompetent to stand trial, or they're trying to evaluate them, they've been charged, but they haven't been convicted. And so sending them to corrections for long periods of time. We just heard of a case where the person charged was there for 4 years. And it was a really very interesting case because it was a father that had killed his daughter, and we heard from another daughter, and so she obviously has a different relationship and view of the alleged perpetrator than a stranger on the street. Uh-huh. And so hearing from her about, she was saying, like, I don't want my father to be, he's had a lifetime of not being able to care for himself. And, she wasn't looking for him to go to prison, but she was looking for him to be held for safety reasons and cared for appropriately. Mm-hmm. And we also heard that it's not just people with mental health struggles, like which Martin said. So some people have developmental disabilities. They can't necessarily ever live on their own or be found competent. People with Alzheimer's, like it's not one type of offender, which is also odd because it's like, what are we going to have? Like 6 people that have very, very different needs in this one program. I know one thing that I asked about in our committee and is could we contract with Massachusetts, New York, and New Hampshire if it's just a few people and it's in proximity. I don't want people going off to Mississippi because, again, it's really important to be, people do better when they're served in their community or nearby.
Yeah, and just to back up just a little bit is making sure that individuals understand what competency to stand trial is. And that is the ability of an individual to help in their own defense and to understand what is happening in court.
So this whole, like, there seems like there's a lot of philosophy and sort of philosophical approach. And of course, like, whenever you're talking about politics, people, you know, the what about crime issue always comes up, right? It's like this weird human, like, driver. Do you take time in the Judiciary Committee to understand one another and the philosophies that you're bringing to the table, or does it just come out in the conversations around the specific issues?
It just comes out.
Yeah.
Very frequently.
No,
robustly.
Yeah. So we I think have a good understanding of where different individuals are on these issues, and that's part of the whole process is to try to find
compassionate versus punitive, or
right.
you know, root causes versus.
But society is sort of, I mean, it's interesting because in college I remember writing a paper on this. Like, do we want punishment because we want people confined for public safety? Do we want to rehabilitate people? Do we want revenge? Like, it feels like some people want all of those, and by the very nature, you can't do revenge and rehabilitation. You know, you can do incapacitation and rehabilitation. So it does feel like whatever sort of view of punishment people bring threads through, comes out regularly as what they're, you know. We have some people on our committee who think we are too soft on crime. And, you know, again, it's like, let's look at the data. And I think Martin's been great at bringing in people who have the data whenever it's available and really hearing from people and not just doing law by, there's a tendency to do law by anecdote, I feel like, and I feel like Martin's been really grounding us in trying not to do that.
It's difficult sometimes because sometimes the best we have is our anecdotes, but so.
Another big topic that you're working on, I mean, I'm assuming you have to really understand the sort of philosophical, the background, the approach that people are bringing as the chair of all the different committee members.
Right, yes, yeah definitely.
Another big sort of philosophical but also far-reaching is Prop 4, the Equal Rights Amendment.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Where's that coming from?
Go ahead.
Okay, so
Just heard testimony, right?
we
there was a public
it's
hearing?
tomorrow night.
It's tomorrow night.
It
Okay,
is
great.
tomorrow
Okay.
night, and I think people have until today still if they want to testify, but they also can submit written testimony. But basically, whenever we try to change the Constitution, it has to pass both chambers in 2 separate bienniums. It has to start in the Senate, and whatever the Senate sends, we can't wordsmith it at all. It does not go to the governor. If it passes 2 bienniums, it goes to the voters. So it did pass in 2024.
Yeah.
I got to present it on the floor. It was thrilling. It would basically, even though we do have some protections in the Vermont Constitution, it would be an equal rights amendment in the Vermont Constitution. And it did pass the Senate. And also, it basically would make sure that it guarantees the state shall not deny equal treatment under the law based on race, ethnicity, sex, religion, disability, sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, or national origin. And the goal was to reinforce and clarify protections against discrimination, building on Vermont's existing constitutional principles of equality and common benefit. So, assuming it passes this, our committee and the House, it's a different makeup than it was 2 years ago, but it passed with 4 no votes.
Yeah, on the floor of the House.
Floor.
Yeah, it was unanimous in our committee.
It would,
Unanimous out of the committee. 4 no votes on the floor.
right, last biennium, so we'll see what happens this time. But it would be on the ballot in November
Yep.
for Vermont voters to decide. If they vote yes, it's going to be added to our Constitution.
How is this different than 1980s equal rights? I remember being
It's
a
the s-
teenager and being just
it's basically,
scratching my head that it
it's
didn't pass.
I know, it's basically the same thing, but I think we added in terms of, right, some of the discriminations that have been happening weren't necessarily things that we were aware of as much back then. I know it is very interesting
Yeah.
that Vermont didn't pass it. I was surprised. When I was doing background when it was up last biennium, which seems like a zillion years ago, it was really surprising it didn't pass, because I would have thought Vermont was the state it would have passed.
Yeah. Yeah.
But-
As a teenager, it was a very confusing thing to experience watching that fail.
Yeah.
And is this in some way supposed to be a bulwark, a backstop against potential federal legislation that might affect transgender folks or might target?
Yeah, I don't know. With the supremacy clause, it probably doesn't go to what federal actions are. I don't think it's going to provide protection in that sense. It's more state action, and it's more laying out what we want state government and municipal governments to do.
Supremacy clause being that federal law supersedes state
Correct.
law?
Yes.
And is that the case in all situations?
Not in all
Yeah.
things, no, not in all things, but as far as the 14th Amendment is more limited than what we have in this. And there's a lot of jurisprudence about discrimination under the 14th Amendment. So it really is not aimed at that. And I could certainly talk about some of the things that we are doing that will help on that area.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. And I don't want to miss the question on immigration and ICE.
Yeah, that's
Oh,
what
that's-
I'm
yeah, that's
kind
what
of
it
talking
is.
about. It's not, I wouldn't say what we're doing is aimed just at ICE and immigration, but it's certainly, issues have become very salient given what we've been seeing in that realm. So that has led to us, the Senate has a couple bills that we still need to take up, and we also passed a bill which tries to address a situation where either state or federal officials acting under color of law, meaning in their official capacity, violate an individual's constitutional rights. It could be a violation of First Amendment rights, that keeping somebody from being able to assemble, or it could be a violation of the Fourth Amendment, searches and seizures without a warrant, or excessive use of force. Any number of these things.
Sounds like you're talking about what happened on Dorset Street.
Well,
Or not.
not necessarily.
Maybe just help
it could be.
tie those together.
Yeah, I mean,
for us.
it could be if was an egregious example of either a federal or state official who has violated one of those. Again, it could be police brutality and the like. That there's a cause of action that one can bring to seek damages or injunctive relief. There's a gap right now where federal officials, it's very hard to hold federal officials liable for violation of constitutional rights. There is something called Section 1983, which can hold state officials accountable for violating constitutional rights, but this would also hold federal officials as well as state officials. It'll almost certainly be challenged. We think we have very good arguments that it should be upheld. And it's one of the things we took a lot of testimony on that, written and in person. So that's a bill that's on its way to the governor. And I think that's probably one of the more important bills related to this kind of situation.
Does it have a name and a number?
It's H849. It's it's been deemed the Constitutional Accountability Act or Converse Section 1983. So that's a very important bill. We're also looking at.
Is he likely to sign it, or have you heard?
I think I'd be surprised if it doesn't go into law.
Okay.
Whether he signs it or lets it go into law without. I mean, because it's really trying to provide a remedy, and without the remedy, you don't really have the right. So S208 and S209 are two bills that came over from the Senate. One, the S208, deals with masking and identification of law enforcement. That's something we're continuing to work on. We're going to have another draft of this of an amendment to that bill this week. And S209 has to do with civil arrests in certain places, sensitive areas we can call them. We already had a law where one can't make a civil arrest in a courthouse or when somebody's on the way to the courthouse. And this would cover administrative warrants that immigration will sometimes try to enforce. And that's not good enough. It has to be a judicial warrant to go into a school or a court or a daycare center, et cetera.
Yeah, I was going to say, so the first one around masking, I'm assuming has to do with limiting the ability of federal agents to mask themselves.
Well, state and federal.
State and federal.
Yeah.
And then the second one, just to translate that for me, meaning an ICE agent arresting someone for immigration violation while they're going for a traffic offense.
No,
Is
it's
that
not.
what
No,
you're talking about? Or
no,
like,
no. It's a
help me
little
understand
bit
it.
different. So ICE agents can arrest somebody for a detention hearing, where the person being arrested hasn't done anything criminally wrong. So there's not a crime, but they can arrest somebody just to have them available for a detention hearing, and it's aimed at that, and it's locations where we don't want individuals to be concerned about going to the location that they're going to run into ICE, to schools, to hospitals, to daycare centers, and there's a whole list of locations that we really think that if somebody is detained or arrested in those kind of situations without a judicial warrant, if it's a judicial warrant, it's fine, then the individual being arrested would have different remedies, and also the Attorney General's office could seek relief as well.
It may get into the weeds here a little too much, but there are these administrative warrants
Right.
that are being challenged, that are being used and are being discussed. Are you making provisions for those at this point?
So
Are you thinking about how the law may change as the practice is evolving?
Yeah, so administrative warrants would not be a judicial warrant, and if somebody has an administrative warrant and goes to one of these sensitive locations, there would be a cause of action against that person.
Okay.
So that is not a warrant that is judicial. It's a different level.
Yeah. And that's for you. I know that gets kind of weedy. We don't have a lot of time left. You have a lot on your plate. You have a lot that you've done. Just tell me a little bit about what's surprised you this legislative session, working with your colleagues either in the committee or kind of overall. Like, have there been any surprises that have come up? I know there's been a lot of kind of underlying fear. And then, of course, this sort of economic and war and, what is going on in the world and,
Right.
federal actions that are hitting Vermont. So what surprised you in the State House this session?
Okay, one thing that has surprised me is it feels like Montpelier has gotten sort of more partisan in ways that Vermont has been more immune in the past. So, I mean, there's always partisan politics, but it's sort of at a different level. I mean, I feel like people can disagree, and that's great because you kind of work through it. But I think there's been more sort of unwillingness to work through, but sort of be just sort of principled in terms of protecting the president's policies, et cetera. That's been one thing that's been surprising to me.
Yeah, I'm not sure what, in 12 years, I guess I'm not surprised
Not
anymore.
surprised by anything. Yeah.
So, I mean, and the one thing is that we've been, we've been under, kind of under the radar a little bit because education and housing and healthcare have really been front and center for the legislature. Last biennium, public safety was right up there, and it still is very important, but so that's been interesting. I would say it's necessarily surprising, but I guess I just would like to mention one other bill real quick, which we didn't talk about, and that's something important to Burlington as well, and that's a gun bill. And we passed out a bill.
Not related to the charter change.
Not
or is
related
it?
to the charter change. We passed out a bill that does a few things related to prohibiting individuals with who are a danger to themselves or others from having a firearm, banning machine guns, and making theft of a firearm a felony, no matter what the value of the firearm is. That's something we sent over to the Senate. My understanding is that it's going to be put on a different bill that's going to add a ban on firearms in bars across the state, not just the charter that's in Burlington. And also will add probably what I think is the most important piece of firearms legislation this year is really strengthening our red flag law and relief from abuse order as far as the relinquishment of firearms, how that happens, where those firearms go, what are the safety
Somebody
precautions
who is a domestic abuse situation.
Right. So that's going to be in the bill as well. My concern is that it's being set up with particularly, although I can agree with the concept of banning firearms in bars, but that is being set up to be vetoed by the governor. And I think that's unfortunate because these other components, particularly the implementation of the red flag law, is really critical. And that may go down because we have the guns and bars component in there. Although I absolutely understand how
This is
Burlington
passed
wants
over
this,
into
so.
the Senate.
Yeah, it's in the
this is-
Senate,
yeah.
and so we'll see what we get back from them.
Yeah.
But that's a
Although
concern.
Texas has, I mean, there are many states that don't have guns and bars. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's not a bad policy. It's just that it's going to lead to a
Right.
veto.
Yeah.
We
Yes,
can't override it.
right.
You have a minute left. What's success look like for you? And if you were about to say something else, so you can pivot to that if you'd like.
Boy, I don't know if you have
What's
an answer
success
to
look
that.
for you this
Getting out
by
of
June?
here by mid-May would
Oh,
be
mid-May.
success to
I've
me.
already put you in June, but yeah. Because you have a threatened veto on the budget already and a threatened veto on the ed reform,
Yeah,
right? So
right.
So I think one thing that's, I'm not answering the success thing, but
Yeah, that's
one
right.
thing that's been interesting is the most popular topic that I've heard about from Burlington constituents, we hear from people all over the state, is people being concerned about the masking, the sensitive places. Like it's been caring about our community and others, and that's been like really lovely to see so many people in Burlington who really, want to protect their, our community.
yeah. Great. Well, thank you both for being here.
you.
Thank you for
Thank
your
you.
hard work for the last number of years. And thank you all for watching. You can continue to watch here at on television, cable television, or if you're watching on YouTube, we appreciate that. And be well.